This is Amend and Progress, your go-to podcast from Vidori for all things promotional material review. Get ready for actionable insights, valuable perspectives, and best practices to elevate your workflow and team morale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Amend and Progress, Vidori's podcast about the material review process. I'm your host, Annalise, and today we're going to be talking about commercial ecosystems. What types of systems fall within the commercial ecosystem, considerations for implementation, and honestly, just considerations throughout. Joining me in the conversation today is Donna Bonarrigo, Managing Director of Trovare Pharma Solutions. Donna, welcome to Amend and Progress. Delighted to have you here today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Could you just give the folks at home a bit of an introduction as to, who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Donna Bonarrigo, and as you said, I'm the Managing Director of Pharma at Trovare Pharma Solutions. And I've been in the pharmaceutical industry. I was in-house for over 25 years and took the leap to go into consulting right around the COVID timeframe and working in a company that did not receive drug approval. So I started down this path and work with companies that are going through launch readiness and utilize my experience in launching over 12 products to help them implement systems and have a successful launch.
Amazing. Certainly have an immense amount of industry background that I know we're going to be drawing on today. So excited to get into this conversation with you. Before we get there, as I shared with you, I'd like to ask just some hopefully easy getting to know you questions just to give everyone a little bit more of a sense of who you are. So are you up for some easy questions here at the top of the episode?
Please fire away.
All right, let's do it. First question, what is your morning beverage of choice?
Well, I will say it's not just my morning beverage of choice. It's an all-day obsession that I have, but it's fresh ground, fresh brewed coffee, and the darker the better. As a matter of fact, I've got my cup right here.
I love it. I love thinking about it as an all-day beverage because isn't that candidly how most of us treat the coffee these days? It's not just the morning beverage. So I love it. I'm an avid coffee drinker myself. Second question, what is your either current or favorite hobby?
The current hobby that I have, and I share it with my husband and 3 other couples, we have a dinner group that we get together. So we share different dining experiences, and part of it is there's a little twist on it that we try to learn to cook something new. So we've done everything from homemade sausages to sauerkraut to pasta, you name it. We kind of take a look at what can we learn new that everyone will enjoy. And we have the added benefit that there's 2 members who are wine stewards. So they bring a lot of wonderful wines for us to try out. And we end up finishing the night off with the food that we've created and having some nice wine.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so delightful. I am so jealous. That sounds so fun. That's an absolutely fantastic hobby. Final question, what is one productivity hack or best practice you use in your daily life?
Well, I'm an early bird, so I'm usually up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock every morning. So I take that time. It's my alone time that I use to reflect on the day. Usually I take a 2-mile walk while I'm doing it. So I get a little exercise. I watch the day come alive. And it just gives me the opportunity to start focusing in on my day, plan for success. And, in operations, which is really where my main focus is, the days can be very chaotic. They're not planned. It's usually putting out fires. So that's my one part of the day that I can control that allows me to really focus, like I said, on success.
Really nice. A nice calming moment before the day comes at us, right? Well, thank you for entertaining those questions. It's just fun to get to know people on a different level. And again, these dinners that you're having just sound fantastic. I want to figure out how to get an invite into these delicious meals that you're providing. Okay, so we're going to talk commercial ecosystem today. I know you have, like you said in your introduction, you've got a lot of industry experience that's going to provide sort of a backdrop to the conversation. In my role of Vidori, I sort of have my perception on what a commercial ecosystem is. I'm sure people in industry have their own based on their experience. How do you define or describe a commercial ecosystem? What's your definition? How do you talk about this?
Well, I think it's a really good point that you bring up because I think most people, when you talk about a commercial ecosystem, the very first thing that comes to mind is sales and marketing. But I think at its most basic level, the way that I would describe it is it really is a network of relationships, processes, and individuals that all are kind of interwoven with the goal of bringing a product to market. And in order to accomplish that, you're really doing it with a lot of external suppliers and vendors as well as internal. So you really need those two to work hand in glove in order to have success. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about the external. So ultimately, you're doing all of this for the patient, right? We're bringing drugs to market for the patient. And that patient is one of the external groups that we're working toward. Healthcare providers, there are advocates, but they're also our clients. It's who the sales reps are going to end up calling on when that day comes. But they're also really advocating for the patients as well. So they're waiting for new innovative therapies to come out so that they can give it to their patients in need. Payers and distributors, they need to make sure that there is product on the shelves for the patients to actually get their hands on, and it's covered and it's paid. So there's a whole process that goes into that. State and federal regulations and regulatory boards. I mean, it's not just at the federal level, but it's also at the state level. We are very, very highly regulated, and it's a good thing, right? We're ingesting product into our body. We want to make sure that it's safe and effective, and those regulatory bodies are really watching every step that we're doing internally. And then a multitude of business partners that we end up partnering with, because there is so much data that we are required to process, to take in and put out, that we need to really work with a lot of business partners in order to achieve that. And then when you kind of combine that with the internal groups as well, it's equally as diverse and it's equally complex. You kind of start with your drug development and manufacturing groups, right? So they're making sure that they're producing product that's safe and effective, but also that they're producing it the same each time. So manufacturing plays a very big role in that, making sure that your drug is stable. So if you ship it from point A to point B, it's not going to fall apart and lose its effectiveness. There's the sales and marketing, right? The one we kind of know of when we think about that commercial ecosystem. And their objective is to promote and sell the product. Market access and supply chain. They're making sure, again, that you've got product at the distributors and that it's actually getting to the patient and that it's available for them. And then medical affairs. And even, we're talking about commercial, and medical affairs isn't usually thought of as being commercial. They're more educational and more medical, but they play a huge role in commercializing product because they're out there talking to the healthcare providers in the community well before we're at that launch stage. So they're making sure that everybody out there understands what the drug is, the attributes of the drug, well before. So I think in summary, it really is more than just sales and marketing. It is this whole entire ecosystem, and it's a complex web of both internal and external people working together, making sure that those innovative and effective products are in the market and ready for patients to ultimately are looking for those great options.
Yeah, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of departments, a lot of connectivity, which I think we'll talk a lot about, because obviously inherent in some of your comments is that some of these systems need to talk to one another to create not only efficiencies from an operational perspective, but just make sure that, data is flowing throughout the organization really smoothly. So I really appreciate that definition because it helps sort of give more of a accurate or maybe more of a bird's eye view compared to maybe the sales and marketing ecosystem that we so often talk about. So now you just talked about a lot of different nooks and crannies of an organization, right? And so by no means it want you to have to list every type of system, but maybe talk me through key systems. What are some key systems that maybe sit within this commercial ecosystem that you think are maybe most critical for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because with each one of those different departments that we just talked about, each one of them has their own reporting, if you will, or their own compliance they need to follow. So there's a little bit of a this is my system and I need to guard it over here. And they're feeding information out and they're feeding information in as well. But I think, just to give a quick example of something like that, like supply chain, we talked about them earlier. It's crucial that they have a system that tracks and traces all the product from the time that it's received until the time that it is dispersed. So, and it's a very complex system in order to do that, but that needs to feed into some of the commercial systems. If we're doing sample accountability as an example, you need to be able to track that sample all the way through. So some of the systems, understanding that they're standalone, but they really do at the end of the day need to connect to one another. Maybe not the full system is connecting, but some of the data is kind of going out and being fed into another system. So I think, there are some synergies and you are able to leverage some of the systems, but there are a lot of them. And I think, some of them that we could talk about that are important, that are kind of, you have to have these. These are key in the commercial ecosystem. First is regulatory and pharmacovigilance systems. Those are the systems that are managing all of your regulatory submissions, all of your communications with regulatory authorities, but it's also making sure that pre and post marketing, you have the ability to report adverse events, because that is very important at the end of the day. It goes into your label, which then dictates all of your promotional activities that you have. So that kind of starts over here, and it's kind of a standalone system. Sure. Data analytics and business intelligence tools. I mean, those are really feeding a lot of these other systems as well. And it's really keeping the whole business informed as to how sales are going and revenue, because at the end of the day, that is one of the things that we're driving toward as well. So they're analyzing sales data, they're analyzing market trends, and they're ingesting information and they're feeding information out as well. Document management, that's one that's really important because it's really with the idea that when you commercialize, your goalpost does change. Sure. A lot of regulation that you're following when you're pre-commercial, when you post-commercialize, it's a game changer to some degree. There's a lot more that you're now expected to track. There's a lot more that you're expected to report to the government agencies. So with that, you've got a lot of SOPs, you've got a lot of recording that you need to do. And QA has this document control system that ensures that you're doing just that there is a system of record that you can go to that shows all of those regulatory submissions, that shows all of those SOPs, shows all the training, et cetera. So that is one system that is very important to manage and maintain all your compliance and reporting requirements. And one that I won't overshadow, and I think that this one is probably the one that most people really know the most, because I think from a commercial perspective, this is the one that we go to most often because it's taking in all of that other data from the other systems, and that's the CRM, the Customer Relationship Management tool. That is a tool that really is, in my opinion, kind of the pinnacle of what you're working on in commercial. Again, with lots of other systems feeding into it, but it is the primary tool for the sales organization. It is what most of the sales reps and the MSL teams are going to use to understand who they're going to call on, who are the physicians that they're looking at, what is their call plan for the day. It's a sphere of influence that we have from a company to all of our external, I'll call them customers, the HCPs. Ultimately, the HCPs and the patients are our customers, and we want a way of being able to track that we're calling on the right people, we're giving them the right information. And that CRM system is that one part, right? It's that one part that's keeping track of that. But it's also, with the information that we have in that CRM, is also feeding the finance group, because there's a fair market value that we need to be paying the healthcare providers. So in order to do that, we need to be ingesting information from CMS open payments and taking that information and make sure that when we're paying Dr. Smith his honorarium, that it's based on fair market value. So the CRM tool is very important for that. It's also for all of our promotional activities that we engage in. All of that is governed by the FDA, by OPDP. So we need systems that manage all of that. So we have review committees that are looking at all of these materials, the PRC or MLR committees who are looking at the materials, making sure that those are all good. And a separate system that is then feeding into the CRM, because the sales are using that CRM in order to detail with the HCPs. And then there's the analytics part of that that's watching the sales aid as an example. So as the rep is working with the physician, we can see how long they're spending on one of the pages in the sales aid. So that allows us to work with the ad agencies to work a little bit different on how those are laid out. So there's a lot of different systems that at the end of the day are all kind of serving the same purpose, which is, are these effective tools that we're using? How can we better inform our end users so that they understand our drug and are using it at the right patients at the right time?
Mm-hmm. So what's the slating of implementation? I imagine some of these systems have to come before others. Again, I imagine there is a long list of all of these systems and when they come and phasing and all of that. But Could you just give maybe a high-level overview of this in terms of the things that you think need to be fundamental, implemented very, very early versus maybe things that come later on, depending on commercialization and other, activities or factors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really, and I hate to use this answer, that it's really dependent on the company. And the reason for that is because each company is really going to be targeting different disease states. They're going to be, their therapies may be much more complex than others. They might have a much larger expected market size. Budget plays a pretty big role in some of that as well. And I think there's also a little bit of, I'll call it turf wars for lack of a better term, but it depends on who has the biggest muscle and can get their system approved and starting the implementation sooner. But I think, so that's the real answer. It's
Sure.
dependent reasons why different systems are put in place at different times. But I will say that what you really should be paying attention to first is any systems that have kind of that regulatory compliance component to it, because you're going to be expected to have those in place. I mean, it's kind of like you have to have them to start working on those sooner rather than later. But you're going to want to get those MSL teams out in place first. So, again, having a system for them to be able to get their materials looked at and reviewed and approved by internal committees, their poster presentations, their publications, their slide decks that they're going to have other healthcare providers use. So those are really important to have because you're going to start utilizing that much sooner.
Sure.
And then, as you're working through that, you're going to have pricing and access. So you've got to get those systems up and running so that you can price your drug and you can make sure that you are working with formularies, et cetera, to have all of that taken care of. Also, contracting is going to be really important at that time as well. So you kind of stage it out with MSL education. Now you're actually working on the product itself, getting it where it needs to be. And while you're doing that, in parallel, you're working on your messaging, what the marketing strategy will be for the product. And then kind of at the latter stage is when you're starting to build out your sales organization. So it's really also looking at not only the runway that you have. I mean, some of these just take a much longer runway and you have to start them sooner. But it's also really important for companies to understand their DNA, if you will, because some companies could take several weeks to get a system up and running, where that same system would take several months in another company. So I think it's really identifying, who needs to sit at the table as you're making these decisions and get the right people making the decisions because they'll get the right systems in there at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Who does need to sit at the table? Now, this could be it depends, right? Depending on your organization and things. But in your experience, to be successful in both system selection, implementation, who are the people that need to be at the table to just make sure that things run smoothly and that you are able to implement things in a timely fashion?
Well, and I think that's a great question. And I think there's usually departments that are notoriously overlooked that really should be considered to have a seat at the table. Because remember, again, you're working with systems, but the systems are also, at the end of the day, serving a purpose. And usually that purpose that's being served has a regulatory or compliance component to it, just because of the nature of the business that we're in. So I recommend always having QA at the table because they're going to need to qualify your vendors. They're going to need to make sure that you're using systems that they have been able to validate as well. So that's really important to get that involved from the beginning, right up front. It's also really important to have IT involved because these are systems. And even though they might be hosted somewhere else, IT needs to understand, are we having single sign-on? Who else do we need to make sure that we're supporting these if we need to? Is the vendor supporting it? So that's a really important group to have. And regulatory and compliance. So regulatory and legal, very important to have for different reasons. I mean, I think the takeaway here is they're not there to tell you that you can or cannot do this or put the system in. They're there to help you avoid some of the pitfalls that you might find when you're implementing one of these systems. And it's better to pay now and work together on it than to pay later and kind of find yourself in a situation where you have delays and, you have to stop everything because you didn't have the right people at the table. And then I think the other ones are kind of self-explanatory. If it's a sales system, obviously having sales leaders at the table, district managers, RSDs, people that you want to bring in who are going to actually be utilizing the system. And I'm always a big proponent of bringing people in who are the end users, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are usually the subject matter experts. They're the ones who can tell you, we don't need all the bells and whistles. We don't need it to fly to the moon. We just need it to take care of these things that this part is really important. The rest of it's kind of nice to have, but it's not so necessary.
Sure. It needs to be a system that's easy to use, right? That we can actually get in and complete day-to-day work.
So just to piggyback on that a little bit, I spent a lot of time working in like those PRC and LR type committees. And as I often said to people, we don't need to spend our time worrying about how to work the software and get confused on the software and have training on the software, because really what we're in here to talk about is the content on the pages of the sales material. That should be the main focus instead of spending time and effort. And that happens a lot. I think in some of these systems, they're so complex that, you end up almost dreading the fact that you have to go in and do something in them, because I go, gosh, it's going to be a full day of learning to try to figure out how to put a controlled document into a shared area. So I think that's really, really important. Make sure you get a system that is user-friendly, that is achieving your goals, but people can actually use it and be effective.
Yeah, you don't want to be distracted on the wrong thing, right? And let technology work with you instead of against you. I think it's a really strong point. So, technology, we're in a very technology-rich era. There are options for everything, and I'm sure that's the case with these commercial ecosystems. You mentioned usability being a key factor. With so much technology out there, what are some considerations or factors or things that you think organizations should be thinking about as they research, assess different systems, demo them? I just imagine there are just so many options. What are the factors that actually matter at the end of the day?
Well, I think one thing to always consider is you are not always going to be in the state that you are today. So scalability is really important, especially in pharmaceuticals, because you get new products, you have new indications. So your company and your industry, what you're servicing, will continue to change. So it's really important that when you're looking at systems that you look for scalability, because it will change. It's not if it's going to change, it's when will it change, and do you have the ability to scale that system appropriately? I think it's also really important to get the right size system for your needs. And it's kind of piggybacking a little bit on what we talked about a moment ago. Don't get something that's so cumbersome or provides so many bells and whistles that you kind of miss the whole point of why you have it, and you lose a little bit of sight of it. Because the other part of it is, with complexity, is usually bigger and it's harder to change. If you have specific needs, it's really hard to work with a partner to have it kind of modify it for your needs. So that's kind of another thing that I would make sure to look for. When you're choosing your partners, make sure that you have a true partner who will work with you, who understands your specific needs and is willing to be a true partner with you, who will look at problems and try to solve them with you together, so that true partnership is there and you're growing together. I think that's really important. That's where I've seen the most success.
Yeah. Almost like the softer factors. Obviously there are capabilities that you're looking for, making sure it's, provides a certain function, but it's almost like some of these softer like the soft skills of technology that make sure that it's successful, right? And we don't often talk about technology as having soft skills, but it's how I would summarize what you just said, are the partnership aspect, the growth with you, making sure it fits your needs. So I think that's a really important consideration for organizations. You touched on this a little bit when we were talking about CRM and sort of the connections between some of these systems. Now, you indicated not all data or information needs to flow between systems, but how do you think about connectivity between systems? Are you for it? Because, some things can be done manually. Things have been done manually in the past, right? Moving content from system A to system B. What is the level of importance you would put on connectivity or integrations in today's world of commercial ecosystems?
I think very high. I mean, for a couple of reasons. So, in my role, I've had the luxury of being audited many, many times, not only internally, but also by the FDA. So I've had to sit in front of an investigator and answer a lot of questions. And it's all what you can produce. So you have to produce a lot of information from your systems. So the manual route, I don't think is a good one because it's very difficult to recreate records. It's very difficult to find records if you have the human error that goes into that. And connectivity serves a great purpose in the sense that it's kind of keeping everyone informed of the same information and just kind of touching it one time rather than touching it multiple times. And, again, because things are so highly regulated with what we do, one little change here kind of has the snowball effect throughout. So, you want that connectivity because you want those changes to kind of flow from start to finish. And what I often call it the system of record. You want to identify what is your system of record so that you have one place to go back to rather than a bunch of disparate systems that you're trying to play catch up with. So to me, it's very important.
Mm-hmm. So helpful and so interesting. What didn't we cover today? Or maybe what would you leave the audience with as like the one takeaway you want to leave folks with today in terms of this conversation on commercial ecosystems?
Well, I think that it's so important, right? I mean, these ecosystems are there for a very important reason, and they're so important, and it's important to get it done correctly. So what I would leave people with is make sure as you're kind of thinking through putting new systems in place, that you really spend the time to go through your business rules. Really important, because if you don't and you have people who aren't on board from the beginning, you'll start getting a lot of scope creep. And those systems or the implementation process that you thought was this big is going to be this big. And unfortunately, in those situations, you've kind of lost what you were trying to achieve in the first place. And I think you start going so far down this rabbit hole that it's really hard to recover from.
Okay. Wonderful way to end a conversation today. Donna, thank you so much for coming on. I imagine there's so many other avenues we could take with the conversation today, but this was a perfect, I think, high-level introduction to this, and just so thankful for your perspective and time today. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And folks, the conversation doesn't stop here. Follow Vidori on LinkedIn. We're always sharing updates on new episodes. Ask us questions. We would love to know if there's a topic that you want to get covered on the podcast that we have yet to pursue. You can subscribe to Amend and Progress on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like today's episode, please rate and review the show. Until next time, this is Annalise signing off for Amend and Progress. Have a fantastic day.